Hello and welcome to the Cisco CCNP Route Training course from TrainSignal. My name is Joe Reinhardt and I will be serving as your instructor through this series. We have a lot of different topics that we'll be covering in terms of IP routing, and we will be doing it at some depth in order to be able to help you practically apply this as well as be prepared for the Cisco CCNP Route exam. The first thing we want to do is to be able to introduce the course to you, what it's supposed to accomplish, what the methodology is, a little bit about me, so that you can feel comfortable with the material. So this is how to get started with this particular training series. In this lesson, I'll tell you a little bit about me, my background, my certifications, and my ability to serve as a mentor and guide through this process. I'll talk a little bit about the course itself, about the processes we'll be using, the basic outline we'll be using, and then finally how to use the course, because like anything else, how you take the material and make it your own is the way to really be able to be successful from a network and certification standpoint. To begin with, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Joe Reinhardt. I'm actually married with 7 children, and I should explain that a little bit. I call it the Merger, Acquisition, and Expansion family plan. My 2 biological children actually serve as the 2 youngest. My wife had 3 of her own, so we put them together, and that made 5. They range in ages from 27 down to almost 18. And then we have 2 nephews that are a part of our life. So it's not nearly as expansive as it might sound, but we do literally have a conference room table that we use when all our families gather together in one place. I'm an outdoor enthusiast. I actually love the outdoors, which being in the Pacific Northwest is great. I am able to hike. My wife and I together are actually able to hike, climb, ride bikes, rollerblade, and do a number of different things. And we are also published authors. We actually published a nonfiction inspirational topic earlier this year, and so it's another thing that I've been able to do. I also happen to be, by previous career, an ordained minister. So while going from ordained minister to CCIE and instructor sounds like a huge leap, it's an interesting story in itself. But suffice it to say, I have a great deal of not only industry experience, but world experience as well. A little bit about my educational background, because naturally anybody could sit down and be able to record things, but you want to actually know that someone knows what they're talking about. I have made this certification journey myself. I began with the CCNA in 2000. I went on to, you do this TCNP when it was still 4 exams, also at 2000. I was at AT&T at the time. I achieved my CCDA and CCDP roughly around the same time. And then I was able to achieve my CCIE in 2004 after 5 attempts. I also have an MBA, and I recently achieved my CCNA wireless as a way of just sort of rounding out some of the things that I was teaching on. So I have a lot of training and certification background. A little bit about my areas of expertise, obviously, in routing and switching, since that's what my CCIE is in. I also have expertise in voice and unified communications. I have a CCVP, which is now called the CCNP Voice. I have done a number of things with security, VPNs, and so forth. And then the Cisco Unified Compute System, or UCS. I have not only developed courses for that, but I've also actually done a lot of practical work with it as well. Just in terms of my industry experience, I have done a great deal of pre-sales engineering, which usually involves design, and this involves very large, well-known companies whose names you'd recognize. Obviously, I don't want to reveal those because of non-disclosure agreements, but the point is I have been able to actually design and even in some cases helped implement some of these solutions that I talk about. In fact, I try to weave stories in through the lessons to let you know some ways these things have been practically used. I have over 13 years of the industry. I currently serve as president of the Seattle Cisco Users Group, and I've been doing that for approximately 3 years. And I also moderate the LinkedIn group Cisco, which right now has about 64,000 members. Just a little bit about my background. Now that I've introduced myself to you, I want to talk a little bit about the course. To begin with, some of the methodology we're going to use is there are conceptual and theoretical items that you need to know in order to be able to function as both a network professional and also successfully complete the exams. These can sometimes be a little dry. For instance, how ARP operates just as at a CCNA level, the moving parts of EIGRP and OSPF may not be all that interesting in some ways, but they are critically important for you to understand how all of these things fit together. But that alone's not enough. It's important to have a practical application of these technologies in order to demonstrate how they operate. So we've built that all the way through this environment. In fact, by the time we finish the course, we will have created an entire rather complex routing environment using all the protocols and features that we'll be talking about. The other thing that we're doing with this is actually talking about practical application of that knowledge with real-world experience. For instance, I will talk about solutions I've designed or implemented or been a part of where these protocols have been used in a specific or particular way. And that gives you an idea of how these can be applied. Because having knowledge is one thing, being able to apply it is another altogether. So let's just summarize a little bit about the outline that we'll be using. This will be a complete total of about 25 lessons, and we will step through them one at a time. Obviously, lesson 1's the one we're talking about right now. But we'll be going through a review of IP routing fundamentals, because in order to be able to move forward, we need to make sure the foundation is built in a solid manner. So just some general principles about IP routing and operations will be helpful. We'll review how our lab is going to be set up, what's involved, how many devices, devices will be running what protocols, and so forth. Then we'll go through EIGRP planning and design. Then we'll actually go through the fundamentals of the EIGRP protocol. We'll then move on to advanced topics, which again, this is a layered approach. You start with planning and design, you get the fundamentals, then you go on to advanced topics, and then troubleshooting. And we're going to use that same methodology for all the protocols. After EIGRP, we'll do the same with OSPF. The advanced topics for OSPF are extensive enough, we've split them into 2 lessons, but it's the same basic methodology. Then moving on to BGP, planning and design, fundamentals, and again, parts 1 and 2 for the advanced topics because they're pretty extensive. Then troubleshooting. Route redistribution, we'll go through that in 2 parts as well, because there are a lot of complexities of taking routes from one protocol and importing them into another. We will then work on policy-based routing and IPSLA, IP version 6 in 2 lessons. And then the last of our actual informational lessons will be on enterprise branch operations. We'll then sort of shift into a practical mode where we'll talk about how to prepare for the exam and then some next steps, for instance, the shoot, T-shoot, and switch exams. So how to use this course? Obviously what you want to do is to maximize this value to yourself and to your career. So one of the things to do is, first and foremost, obviously watch and listen to the lessons and take notes. These lessons are designed to be engaging and entertaining. The last thing I want to do is put you to sleep. I want it to be somewhat fun and somewhat informative without obviously going over the top. So listen to the content and take notes. If there's some things you may not understand, go ahead and jot those down. Or if there's some way you want to be able to take that information and commit it to memory, you can do that as well. Identify some areas that you may need a deeper understanding of, because trust me, there's a lot of information here. If you feel you haven't quite gotten what you need, don't be afraid to listen to the lesson again. Just as an example, when I first started out in the industry, when I barely knew anything, I checked out a book from the library called the Novell Internet Plumbing Handbook. The first time I read it, I think maybe I absorbed 10%. There was so much in it I didn't understand. But I kept reading it and rereading it and rereading it until I got to a point where I actually not only knew the material, but also knew how it all fit together. So you may need to do something like that, and don't be afraid to do it. If necessary, you can do some additional research on your own. There are a lot of good resources, Cisco.com being one, that you can use to actually dig a little deeper. And of course, there are numerous printed materials as well. The next thing to do is find a way to practically apply the lesson concepts in a hands-on lab environment. One way to be able to do at least parts of this is a simulator called GNS3. It actually allows you to run actual router code, and in the route environment, it actually can be very helpful. But by all means, take EIGRP, OSPF, BGP, and so forth, and apply them in a lab environment. You may have surplus equipment that may be older. In fact, there are a number of elements in our lab that aren't exactly current equipment, but they are able to take care of all the functions that are talked about in the exam blueprint. Find a way to practically apply it. So what have we covered in this introductory material? We talked a little bit about myself, about my background, my education, and how I can serve as a guide for you. A little bit about the course, the methodology, how we'll apply things, and then finally, how to use the course in order to get maximum value out of it. Thank you for your attention. We have so much material to cover, and trust that you will enjoy the process and the journey.